Folks, we're on to our final talk of the session. We're back to Newcastle, and we have Dr. Harley Stevenson-Cocks, who's going to be talking on SciComm Summer, a novel project to boost student employability and skill development. And don't forget to use Padlets, otherwise we're going to look pretty silly. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, James. Yeah, my name is Harley. I'm fortunate enough to work alongside some great colleagues like Vanessa and Damien, who are here today at Newcastle. Less fortunate to have been given that name when I was born, which is the bane of my life very often. And I'm going to talk about a project that Vanessa and I conceived and ran last year and actually has rerun again this year, which we hope addresses some of the things that I think we've covered in this session already, really, in terms of engaging students in employability and upskilling themselves, especially those that don't typically engage with that sort of thing. So we had our placement hats on at the time because Vanessa and I were looking after placement students. And we normally have about 20 students per year in the biomedical sciences gaining competitive placement years. For the most part, this is because they've already done prior part-time work or voluntary experience. They've done extracurricular activities, engaged in sports and societies and things like that, or they've engaged in some or many of the various opportunities we actually have in the school. So we have loads of paid ambassadorial roles in the school. They evidence all of these things on their CVs, and therefore placement providers go, oh yeah, we'll hire you, you're already skilled enough. Then this little individual came along in 2020 or late 2019. And what that meant was that a lot of those opportunities that they would normally evidence on their CV were largely cancelled. So if they hadn't already sourced that extra work experience, they wouldn't be able to. Then it had knock-on effects in the following year because those sorts of opportunities slowly filtered back, but they were much more limited. A lot of people were still very uncertain about COVID, so they didn't necessarily go back to normal in terms of these sorts of things. And we realised there is a kind of disproportionate effect on the students that are shielding, that are international students, that may have caring responsibilities and things like that. They were more likely to be affected by the reduction in opportunities. So very last minute, I would probably say, we decided to try and come up with a plan that we could implement that would target these students and help give them, basically plug that gap in terms of giving them some experience. We pitched it on the idea that it was going to improve their core skills, some of which they developed during their degree anyway, but we also wanted to improve their communication skills, team working, problem solving, things like that. I underline confidence here because I think over the past few years, we've probably noticed that students really lack confidence, not just in academic work, but socially as well. So hopefully by giving this kind of opportunity, we're going to boost them in that area as well. I don't want to say that we committed self-plagiarism, but we have a science communication module in the school anyway, and we kind of lifted some ideas from that and tweaked it into a 3-week project, which we were initially running as a pilot last summer, based all around science communication. It was a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous delivery, all entirely online, so there was no requirement for students to be in Newcastle, and the vast majority of them weren't. I think the majority of them weren't even in the country at the time. But that was a selling point. We were hoping to make it really accessible to the students that would otherwise not be able to do it. We had to plug in some assessments to make sure that they actually did it and had some kind of quantifiable feedback at the end of it. The overall gist that we were hoping to improve their CVs overall while also upskilling them in various areas, with a focus on placements at the time, although as it evolves, we're kind of dropping that angle to some extent, although it's still very much useful. To make sure that it worked, we designed some pre- and post-project surveys which were focused on skill development. So we wanted the students to hopefully recognise that they had improved their skills and to give them a little bit of application experience, and also to make it somewhat competitive in terms of getting a place. We asked them to write a short statement of motivation when they applied. Generally what we did is we basically looked through the university's press office website and picked out 5 recent scientific papers which were vaguely related to the biosciences. All of the students that applied, we split them into groups, and each group got given a paper. And these are the papers that we used, which you can have a look at. Literally, the most recent 5 that had a bioscience focus. We could have picked any number of papers realistically. And then over this 3-week period, it is rather intense for the students because they're used to having a lot more time for the assessments, but ultimately what they did is they produced a literature review of the subject area, so based on the paper they were given, which they prepared individually, and as all literature reviews are, was targeted at other academics. We got them to do an individual oral presentation, but to enhance their communication skills, we wanted them to target it at GCSE age pupils, so 15, 16-year-olds. So they had to use completely different language and register. We got them to do a conference-style poster. Again, it was over Zoom, but they did that as a group, and they were pitching that towards each other. So that was more about what skills have we actually learned from doing the project. And longer term, we said, well, you've got all of this now, go away and actually develop your CV, get yourself a LinkedIn profile so that you're set up for second year and beyond to actually hopefully get some more success. Like I said, we did those surveys. We also tracked those students that did actually go on to attain a placement year the following year. So those that are currently going out on placements. This is a brief overview of the timetable to some extent. So we had an introductory session, which Vanessa and I ran. We had a press release workshop. So that's where we got somebody from the press office to come in and tell the students what a press release is and what the press office do at a university. And then we gave them some basic information and training and how to do a literature search and how to write academically. So on this timetable, anything in green is basically not us in the school, it's somebody else that we've done. So it's quite easily adaptable across your own institutions, trying to steal expertise from other areas to some extent. They then submitted their literature review after the first week, and then we moved into presentation mode. So they got a skills workshop on how to present. They've learned about why it's important that people engage with research and why the university tries to engage others with their research. And they had a practice presentation session. They had done one presentation assessed in their first year, but I think they appreciated not having to do it completely off the cuff for the very first time. And then they did their presentations. And the last week was a little bit of a wrap up. They had some current placement students at the time giving them talks about what they did. They had a LinkedIn session, some CV support, and a meet the researcher session, which we got one researcher actually took us up on our offer to do a bit of a Q&A, which was nice. And then, like I said, they did their group poster and worked on their CVs, etc. over summer. We had 26 applications and inadvertently picked up one of our new med students. So that's from our campus in Malaysia, which we didn't actually actively aim for, but it was a kind of welcome benefit. And we accepted more because we're nice. We had a rough idea of a cap of 30 students. So 26 actually worked out quite well. 24 of them ended up completing it. And of those that filled out the surveys, 57% said that they wanted to do a placement year after stage 2. So actually around about half of them weren't necessarily thinking about doing the placement. They were just there for the skill development in general. And about a quarter already knew what they wanted to do. And I think if we actually had the whole cohort for this, it would be much more like 5 or 10%. So to some extent, we've possibly captured some that are already thinking towards the future. And the demographics are up there. So the vast majority were home EU, around about a quarter were international. So we asked them, which of the following do you hope to develop by participating in this project? And these are all the skills that we asked them to identify. The first 10 are from our graduate framework, so you could easily adapt this to your own universities. And the last few are just generic academic skills, really. So this is what they hoped to develop. And then in the post-project survey, we asked them, which do you think you did develop? And this is what we got back. So I've highlighted here the few where they actually felt they didn't develop them, but they hoped that they did. So it was a bit of a kick in the teeth to see that the 4 academic skills at the end, they actually felt like they hadn't developed them. But I'll touch upon why I possibly think that might be next. We asked them to rate themselves as well, not just what do you want to do, but how would you rate yourself on a scale of very poor to very good, 1 to 5. And this is what they came out with, so largely average across the board. Afterwards, they, for the most part, increased their rating, self-reported rating in each of these skills, apart from a couple. Engagement stayed the same. I've suggested they probably were more engaged because they had engaged in the project, so it's a bit of an odd one there. Resilience marginally decreased, and again, I would say that this cohort of students, if anything, are more resilient than normal. Interestingly, they reported that they did increase themselves in each of the 4 academic skills that they said that they didn't. So I think this was a bit of a quirk in the way that we inadvertently sent the post-project survey out before we'd given them all their feedback. So they hadn't seen how well they'd done, because for the most part, their literature reviews and things like that were actually quite good. And yeah, it's a shame that they don't produce such high quality coursework during their academic studies sometimes. In terms of placement attainment, like I said earlier, 57% of them wanted to pursue a placement after stage 2, and we increased that a little bit, so a few more of them thought, oh, actually, maybe I should do a placement. And of those that at the end of the project decided that they wanted to do a placement, 73% of them have actually attained one, which I think is a fairly good conversion. And in fact, we're on bumper numbers this year for placement attainment. So I'd like to say it's entirely down to this, but it might not be necessarily. Of the students that are now gone on placement, so they've literally just started their placements, we sent a follow-up survey and 7 of them kindly responded. All of them said that this project definitely aided them in their second year studies, especially the literature review and presentation practice. All of them mentioned it in their placement applications, which is good because that was kind of the purpose. And all bar one said that they specifically mentioned it in their interviews. For the most part, the interviewer was really interested to know about the project. And of those, again, 6 or 7 felt that it was definitely advantageous for them in getting the placement that they ultimately attained. Some other things we asked them, just to basically make sure we were on the right track, was, do you feel that everything that we gave you was sufficient? And thankfully, they all said yes. All bar one would recommend the course to a friend or peer, and the one that didn't, just didn't know if they would, which we shouldn't have put as an option, really. And did they all enjoy it? Yes, which is good, another good thing. The main challenge is time and doing this all very, very late. So our June exams and all the associated wrap up was mid to late June. This started in the beginning of July that year. So we had essentially a 2-week window to try and prepare all of this. That's when we decided, right, we'll actually do it. So getting it all done was time consuming. Delivery of the project itself can be very time consuming, although we've learned quite a bit more about how to make it better. Marking, we signed ourselves up to mark 24 times 3 of more assessments, which yeah, isn't always great when you've just come out of a heavy marking period anyway. And the other challenge is to make sure that we try to actually reach more of those students that don't normally do this kind of thing. So that's something that we're aiming for. Next up, we've had the same project run again this year with some minor amendments. I would like to present that data, but again, it finished at the end of July. All of my annual leave was in August, so I've not had time to present all yet and analyse it, but we do have some funding to do that now. So the faculty have kindly given us some money to get a student intern involved in analysing the data and planning next year's delivery as well. So we are repeating, we are hoping to expand and spend some of that money that we've been given. This is just some of the feedback that we got. Some running comments will appear up on screen. All of this we basically plan to take on board. What do the students want to actually get out of it? And we can hopefully adapt it each year to meet what the students want. So it wasn't just me doing it, like I said. Vanessa was crucial at the beginning. We've had another member of staff, Beth, take them on board this year as well. And a student intern last year made that 2-week window much, much easier for us by doing some of the groundwork in getting all of the files and resources ready. And various contributors across the university, which we've actually expanded on this year as well, have been really crucial. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So happy to share any of our insights and get any more feedback.
Thank you so much, Harley. That's a great project, a great talk. You have responded to my plea for questions on Atlas, so we do have one, Harley. So someone in the room said, great project, which I agree with. Have you thought about how you can make this opportunity accessible to more students? So those with paid work or family or other commitments can take part. I also noticed it was overwhelmingly female, so I think more about targeting a bit more on that as well.
Yeah, so on the sex issue, our cohort is overwhelmingly female. I can't remember the specifics.
74%.
So it's about representative, yeah, which is okay. But yeah, there's definitely something about, like Vanessa said earlier, males uptaking these sorts of opportunities. Accessibility, I should have said, but we recorded all of our sessions. So any students that were doing paid work or voluntary work or anything else over the period didn't have to attend any of the sessions. They could catch up in their own time. And we were very much flexible if, you know, they had shift work for that week, so they hadn't had any time to do their literature review. We weren't asking them to submit an extension request or anything like that. We are very flexible with it. So we try to sell out on that point as well. It shouldn't discourage any students from applying if they have other commitments and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Questions from the floor?